2006-XX of the City Commission of Lake Worth, Florida, amending Chapter 23 of the Code of Ordinance, actually, I'm sorry, that's 2016-13.
Thank you.
Of the City Commission of Lake Worth, Florida, amending Chapter 23 of the Code of Ordinance by amending Article 1, Division 2, Section 23.2-12, definitions, Article 2, Division 3, Section 23.2-30, site plan review, Article 3, Division 1, Section 23.2-15, notice requirements, Article 3, Division 1, Section 23.3-6, permitted use table, Article 3, Division 2, Section 23.3-17, MUDH, mixed use, Dixie Highway, Article 4, development standards, Section 23.4-3, exterior lighting, Section 23.4-6, home occupations, Section 23-4-10, off-street parking, Article 5, supplemental regulations, Section 23.5-1, signs, Article 6, environmental regulations, Section 23.6-1, landscape regulations, providing for severability, providing for codification, and providing for an effective date.
Thank you.
Let me say that again.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
So moved.
Second,
I'll second.
public comment cards? Jack? Let's check the number.
There's one.
There's one.
Okay.
10A, that's it. More clickers?
Thank you. 2508 Lake Osborne Drive, Mark Rickards. I'll make it really brief. I know this was heard about a month ago. I have a client with a code amendment kind of buried in the mix of the whole larger code processes which are coming for you tonight. I would just ask the commission if there's something that's super controversial and you want to table, could you just table a piece of it so that the majority can move forward? And then secondly, I would just ask all of the commission, all 5 members, to show up for the second reading, just as a request, so that the business of the city can move forward. Thank you very much.
Okay, we've got a motion on the floor and a second. Public comments? Vice Mayor?
I'm just going to call the question.
Okay, question has been called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Okay, motion carries 3-2.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Commissioner McQueen?
may I ask the city attorney for a clarification?
Sure.
Uh,
Of what?
What just happened? So there was no commission discussion on this item, is that correct?
This is the first reading of something that was already passed in the first reading, which was already vetted in the second reading, which now is back to the first reading. I think there's been plenty of commission discussion on this, no? I mean, I wasn't at the last meeting,
That's
but
an opinion, and that's why there are 5 of us. There might be different opinions.
is it the goal to go over the same things? Over?
Sometimes the things that we pass have a lot of influence on people's lives, and I'm a little struck that you would let this just go without any discussion whatsoever.
Well, the question was called number 1, and I gave my opinion on it the first time I approved it, so.
Okay, so we've heard your opinion.
Okay. Item 10B, City Attorney, would you read the ordinance, please?
Item 10B is ordinance number 2016-15 of the City of Lake Worth, Florida, amending Chapter 23 of the Code of Ordinances by amending Article 3, Division 1, Section 23.3-6, permitted use table, Article 3, Division 3, Section 23.3-14, DT, downtown, Article 4, Section 23.4-13, medium and high density conditional uses, providing for severability, providing conflicting ordinances, repeal codification clause, and effective date.
We'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second? We'll get a conversation after a motion is made in a second. Do we have a second?
I'll second it for conversation, but I think it needs a small amendment.
Okay. Commissioner McBoyd?
Yes, this is an item that modifies the LDRs, if I understand it right, and I think we might want to hear from William Waters, that would allow drive-through facilities that are not restaurant-related and allows them only west of Dixie Highway, is that correct? And only in the downtown area that is west of Dixie Highway.
Make sure I can answer the question correctly. I'm William Waters, Community Sustainability Director. This is a property owner requested text amendment. that does affect the properties that are on the west side of Dixie Highway in the downtown zoning district. The request was made to allow commercial drive-through only on the areas west of Dixie. It involves essentially 3 blocks. Let me pull up that map. And right now, the downtown zoning district, based on the ordinance you just passed on first reading, the only drive-throughs allowed in the downtown are for banking institutions, financial institutions. This would broaden that a little bit to allow them, commercial uses to have a drive-through on the blocks of the downtown zoning district that are west of Dixie Highway,
Follow-up question.
which is, this is the city hall, and here are the 2 blocks that are in question that would then be able to have commercial drive-throughs, excluding restaurants. You might note that the CVS already has a drive-through. The vacant SunTrust building here has a drive-through. Both of those qualify as commercial uses.
Well, I have a couple of questions. Just in terms of policy, it seems odd to me that we would choose to subject a particular part of town, particularly west of downtown, to more motorized traffic. If we're gonna do it, why would we discriminate against one part of town and treat it differently than another? In that vein, it also seems a little bit like it's almost spot zoning. It's just barely different from it, that somebody wants something different and they just ask for it and we say, okay. Sort of runs counter to the idea of having zoning. The other one that really struck me as very strange is that I believe there's been quite a bit of discussion from the dais for a number of years about how Lake Worth is recognized as having small lot sizes, and that this is a wonderful thing that encourages bikeability and pedestrian traffic and helping to make us a less car-driven environment. Why on earth do we want to encourage more motorized drive-through things? An idea that was great in the 1950s and really is not something that, you know, when you go to the National League of Cities or the Florida League of Cities, and you go to those special workshops about communities looking to really move forward and bring in the millennials. It's funny, you don't hear a lot of millennials saying, you know what we need? I want to move to a town with more drive-thrus. It seems like we're going backwards and flying in the face of what we've already done. So I'd appreciate some insight on that, either from you or from my fellow colleagues. And then I have a request, if we're going to go do it anyhow, I have modifications to suggest.
The general character of the downtown zoning district west of Dixie is distinctly different than the character east of Dixie Highway. During the discussions of the LDRs, there was quite an emphasis placed on the appropriateness or not of drive-throughs. At the end of the discussion, and this was a clerical error that I guess it was called as a scrivener's error we're trying to correct for the previous ordinance. We inadvertently deleted the ability to have drive-throughs with financial institutions, and most banks, all of which that we have in the city, have a drive-through, and there was a bank that is interested in doing some renovation work and possibly a new location that would like to have a drive-through facility, which is now the predominance of the way that most banks do their business. So the previous ordinance you just passed on first reading, which is the second time, does allow financial institutions with drive-throughs in the downtown area. When we were posed the question of what other types of drive-throughs might be appropriate downtown, staff did very strongly emphasize that we did not want to see, based on citizen input as well as our sustainability goals, to see drive-throughs of any kind other than the financial ones east of Dixie Highway. But the western side was a little different because there were already 2 established drive-through entities there. And if we were going to open the door for a drive-through, it was going to be a very, very tight door in that we did not want to see drive-through restaurants in that location, and they would only be open to commercial type activities predicated on the size of the property, because to get a drive-through in, it is a little bit difficult. We have put performance standards in that it be screened from the street. and some other things that are incorporated as this ordinance, so that which we didn't have before, so that the properties that would be open to a drive-through are somewhat limited in that general area. We already do allow drive-through facilities on the rest of Dixie Highway, portions of 10th Avenue, Lake Worth Road, and portions of Lake and Lucerne, west of Dixie Highway. So based on the narrowness of what could be allowed, staff was comfortable in recommending approval for this type of drive-through use west of Dixie Highway.
How often?
I would also say that it's striking, I have an equity problem with the concept that the east side is too good to have drive-throughs, but it's okay to put them on the west side. I think we've done a lot of that kind of discrimination in the past, so I'm not very comfortable with doing that. But another one that makes no sense to me, Dixie Highway now is got a ton of traffic on it and has lots of issues with access to businesses. Why would we want to do something that is likely to put even more traffic on it? At least you can't argue that it's going to reduce traffic.
I don't believe it's going to reduce traffic. I don't believe it's actually going to generate more. There may be more stops of traffic to actually go to businesses that may have a drive-through. And I would like to clarify the record that I did in no way say that the east side is less attractive or worse off than the west side. There is a distinct character difference in the downtown area between Dixie Highway going east to Federal and the Dixie Highway area of the zoning area of downtown west of Dixie. The two blocks are quite a bit suburban in nature compared to the rest of the downtown zoning area. The buildings are fairly new, and in essence, there's already two drive-throughs that right now are non-conforming buildings, which the SunTrust Bank building would be challenged to be redeveloped or reutilized without the ability to keep that drive-through there. And then CVS already has a drive-through. So the precedent has already been set on that side of Dixie Highway. In the eastern portion, the only drive-throughs we have are associated with banks, and they are on larger parcels. And that would include Wells Fargo, PNC, Bank of America, and Chase.
Vice Mayor?
Sure. Just to be clear, so I'm a little confused. I thought we would be able to put restaurant drive-throughs on the west side of Dixie.
No.
Well, how are we ever gonna get a Chick-fil-A in here?
They can go 1 block north of where we are or 1 block south.
Like, what do you, well, give me an example where one block would
This is a
be.
very this is a very specific 2-block
The
stretch.
downtown zoning area ends right here.
Okay,
This
so,
is First Avenue South,
Okay.
Second Avenue North. Anywhere else on Dixie Highway, Chick-fil-A can come move.
okay, good. All right, one question. Seriously.
Okay, question has been called.
Yeah. Just have a clarification.
Yes.
because
Let me go
Based
back.
on the conversations, if you read what William had up there, Exhibit C, commercial drive-through excluding all restaurant uses, and then it says, and property fronting Lake and Lucerne. So they're apparently, and as you can see, we already have 2 buildings, CVS and SunTrust, on Lake and Lucerne. And I think there was a disagreement between the planning board and the historic preservation board on that. So that language we wanted to highlight for you and come to a decision on the fronting Lake and Lucerne language. I don't know, William, if you want to explain that a little bit.
The planning board recommended approval for this amendment, excluding the and properties from the Lake and Lucerne avenues. The preservation board in their discussion a week later added that, feeling that properties that were fronting Lake and Lucerne were not appropriate for drive-throughs, even though the 2 properties that do front Lake and Lucerne already have a drive-through. This addition here would also undo part of what you just approved, possibly on the previous ordinance. So in speaking with the attorney's office, we do need some clarification whether you want to keep that language or not. If you do, then I will probably need to go back and figure out how to marry these 2 ordinances together so they aren't in conflict.
Vice Mayor?
Okay, so what language changes do we have to make so you don't have to go back and remove it?
And properties fronting Lake Avenue.
Hold on one second. Glenn, the question has been called. Where do we sit at this point?
What was it called?
The question was called.
Well, there can always be a motion made to kind of overturn the call in question.
I move that we overturn the call of the question.
We'll need to if we're gonna make adjustments.
Well, doesn't it
That's
have to
fine.
come from the person? that-
It comes from, you may just wait.
That's fine, I just want to move this along, if we can get the language changes and take the
So you're
vote.
withdrawing
You're
your...
withdrawing
Yep.
your request, thank you.
Okay. Move afterwards.
Yes.
So the phrase right here, and properties fronting Lake and Lucerne Avenues would need to come out, and so there wouldn't be in conflict with the previous ordinance.
And,
Hold on one second, Commissioner Meyer?
Sure. I just heard some conversation of what this project may be. City Attorney, am I allowed to discuss that? Is that somehow under wraps what this project is ultimately going under?
There's nothing that's been submitted to staff as to what the project would be, so I am not at liberty to say what it is, but I don't know for sure.
Okay. I have heard that this project is potentially a Starbucks. Does that not qualify as a restaurant?
Starbucks would not qualify as a restaurant. It's not governed under the Department of Business and Professional Regulation as a restaurant. It is governed under possibly, for the food service it does do, under the Department of Agriculture, and is considered a mercantile establishment, thus falling under commercial, not restaurant.
Wow.
Okay.
Interesting.
and if I might comment, just a point of clarification, William, you mentioned that it was the Historic Resources Board that inserted the language properties fronting Lake and Lucerne, is that?
Yes.
It certainly seems to me like the argument of convenience of dealing with marrying the two ordinances, that's, we have to do housekeeping things and sort stuff out all the time. That seems like a pretty poor argument to overrule what Historic Resources proposed. They presumably had some discussion on it. Was it a unanimous vote, or?
I can look at their, while I'm looking that up, the item under which Mr. Rickard spoke, which the client has been waiting since, I believe, November
Correct.
for this change. If this change goes through, that bank renovation couldn't happen because that property faces in front Lake Lucerne.
So you need that line removed for that, one of that.
Therein lies part of the dilemma, is that and I didn't identify the conflict until I was preparing for this presentation, looking through the whole thing, and I'm like, okay, if we don't allow drive-throughs on properties that front Lake and Lucerne, we automatically make PNC Bank, Nations Bank, Chase Bank, and Wells Fargo Bank, as well as SunTrust, all non-conforming banks. And Chase Bank could not be redeveloped as a bank, which is what is proposed to happen on the west side of that property, which they've been waiting for 6 months for that zoning to take place. So if the language stays, Chase Bank couldn't move forward with their new.
And was the Historic Resources Board aware of this at the time? Presumably they are informed of.
They inserted that in their motion, and I was there, though it did not click in my head that that was gonna be a conflict until later. And I apologize for not bringing it to their attention at the time, but it just didn't hit me in the spur of the moment, because they had quite a bit of discussion, made a motion, it passed, and then the recommendation came to you. I guess it's about 3 weeks later. They did vote 6-0 to recommend that approval, but the planning board recommended 6-0 to not have, they didn't include that language.
Thanks, Mayor.
If it's possible, what exactly do we have to do here tonight to keep it simple and make everybody whole?
Well, Madam Mayor, I suggest that first a motion to me as to whether you want that language in or out. It's, properties fronting Lake and Lucerne. Then, based on your decision then it's a motion to approve or not approve.
So, and by doing so, pardon me, but by doing so, that takes care of the bank problem.
Yes.
Okay.
I just want to interject. One of the things that we've been consistent as a board on in the past, where we found consensus when we've dealt with a lot of controversial issues, has been what exists there currently. When we talked about things, when we had the restaurant waivers, and we had this and that, is this still operating as, or whatever? I mean, banks have existed at those four corners there, the CVS at those four corners. When we look for investment in the Dixie Highway corridor and in commercial areas, we put, of course, laws and regulations into place from our LDRs and comprehensive plan and whatever else. When we're looking for investment, and there's something, I mean, we've got 5 institutions that are already in that corridor that will then be in violation of it.
They wouldn't be in violation.
They would now be non-conforming properties, which each time we would have an issue with anything that came before on it, right?
If they wanted to expand or
Or do
alter
anything.
their operations, it might be a little bit of a challenge.
Right. I just look, you know, we're so much an infill community. We're not looking to reinvent the wheel and turn the whole place into a circus, but we're also looking to fill in areas that have been blighted for decades. And while we have interest in the investment, as long as there's things within the corridor that already exist there and are not high traffic, and if you think about it, back to the 1950s or 60s or before 95 was built, Dixie Highway was a bustling center for business and commerce. There was no 95 at that time. Things came down, there were hotels and motels and shopping plazas and everything existed. All the business pretty much for the most part existed on Dixie Highway. It has been abandoned and blighted and full of prostitution and everything else for the longest amount of time. Aren't we looking for infill, not complete blowing out of, but infill that's going to be smart and not high volume and high traffic like banks and commercial institutions that shut down at reasonable hours and don't affect communities and things of that nature? I don't know. I would just say that I'm for making the change. I think, you know, I don't have any commercial drive-through west of Dixie Highway is fine by me,
It's
You know.
still restaurants.
excluding restaurants. In that area from 2nd Avenue North to 1st Avenue South, correct? I'm fine with that. Commissioner Rosso.
We have a motion and I seconded it. I would amend my second.
We don't have a motion.
Yes, we do.
It was amended. He released it. I would still need a motion at this point because.
Called the question and released it.
I released the.
Oh, we have the
But,
motion.
yeah, there's still
Okay,
a
motion.
motion.
Thank you very much, sorry.
I will amend my motion. I will amend my motion to reflect the language that William asked to be taken out.
Okay, and second, who was seconded it?
I was the second.
Well, you had said, so you can't amend, it wasn't your motion. Whose motion was it? Thank you, that's what I thought, that's why I was staring at you.
I'd be happy to amend my motion.
Okay, and then would you like to amend it to what Commissioner Rosso
Absolutely,
just said?
yes.
And then you'd like to second that? Is that what it is? Okay, Tammy Panza?
Hi, Tammy Panza, 160 North Elm. I have an opinion of that traffic situation in that area, and I have to say I would love to have drive-through banks, but I would not be a fan, much as I love coffee, if there was a coffee shop that went in there, because you'd have a complete traffic glut and backup in the area due to the lights being so close in proximity with each other at various times. It would be hellacious. So I would say that there should be some limitation that should be banks only and no, I mean, if you've ever been to the Dunkin' Donuts up in West Palm, they're out on Dixie Highway 3 feet, 3 cars out getting in there. I know how Lake Worth people love their coffee, so I don't know if there's any wording you could put in there about just banks. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner McWay?
I understand the wish to encourage development and bring in tax base and cure blighted areas and all those things. However, I think that easily can become one of those deals that it's not always straightforward to see the unintended consequences. I think Ms. Panza's comments are pretty well taken. I think all of us have come down Dixie Highway coming southbound and have gotten held up behind the bus. Buses serve at least, a public transportation function, get some cars off the road, help some people get around. We already have things like Starbucks in walkable areas. We've had a commitment. Mayor, I believe you've spoken on numerous occasions here about your involvement with MPO and looking to make Dixie Highway much less of a car traffic sort of a thing. Sure, before 95, it had all sorts of traffic on it, probably. We have 95 now. I think there are a lot of people that would like to see, there are a lot of businesses that would like to see less traffic going on Dixie Highway such that they could get in and park, not drive through, but park at those businesses. People, I've been told that numerous times that that's an issue. So it seems to me that we are ignoring information that people have provided. I find it quite sketchy that Starbucks can come in under some technicality. All of us in our rational moments would say, well, Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts, that sounds a lot like a restaurant to me. Yeah, maybe you don't quite sit down for the same kind of meal, but there's a lot of, it's basically a sit-down place and you get some coffee. So to me, this is very much not in the character of Lake Worth. I think the suggestion from Tammy that if you want to do it for banks, fine. That would address your issue of consistency. So I would suggest change and modify the language to limit it to banks. Now you're consistent with the existing uses, so you don't have your issue of non-conforming, but it doesn't open it up to a bunch of other things that have problems with it.
William, if you're not aware, are you sure that it's going to be, that's the item that's being proposed there, or have there been any site plans for anything that have been submitted?
Nothing's been submitted formally, we have just had some preliminary discussions with a property owner and the CRA.
Okay, just like the site plan when Mr. Rickards was here before, when we talked about the egress and ingress on the 10th Avenue North buildings and whatever, Ms. Pianza, in reference to if that was to even be considered or a site plan was to be put in there, it would have to address the ingress and egress of the property to see whether it was and it would be approved or not approved based on those possibilities, and there would be community input on that as well. Again, not.
It is conditional land use, it would go to the planning and zoning board. There would be, the traffic concurrency is exempt because we're in the urbanized area of Lake Worth. But because some of the egress issues will be on Dixie Highway, which is a county road, the county would be commenting on the traffic management of the site plan. We don't actually have our own traffic engineer at the city, but we would probably entail some expertise through public services in getting the traffic management.
Okay.
And
Commissioner McPoy?
it seems to me that we mentioned earlier that we were not eager to take on lawsuits. It's pretty hard to imagine that this would not increase traffic and increase congestion. And it seems foolish for us to approve it, knowing that we're headed down that path. And the comment that, well, we'll deal with that at the site plan level, frankly, is not very persuasive, because at the site plan level, you've got somebody who's invested and they're gonna put money into the city and they're gonna bring in taxes, and nobody ever denies anything at that point. The place for us to be, as you sometimes say, Mayor, correctly, put on our big girl pants and our big boy pants and say, wait a minute, this is just not a very good idea.
I think it's disingenuous for you to say earlier that you support economic development in certain areas when every single project that comes before this commission, you scrutinize
Of course I scrutinize
and
my job.
and offer obstacles